Hey everyone, welcome back to the Fight for Your City podcast, where today we have our first ever guest. I was trying to figure out who the best guest I could get is, and that fell to my beautiful wife, Emma. At the time we're recording this, she just got through her second day of school. Emma is a first grade teacher at Teacuple Elementary here in Evansville, Indiana. How long have you been teaching again, Emma?
5 years.
I just want to note that I did know that. I'm just asking it for the sake of this podcast. But Emma, one of the things that I find so interesting is that teachers are the backbone of any community that they're a part of. Like, community cannot exist without teachers. Like, we cannot function as a society without our children getting the basics of, how to do math, how to read, etc., all that stuff. So I just want to kind of take it through that. What led you to wanting to take on the calling, if you will, of being a teacher?
I've always been around children growing up and just doing different kinds of things like in the church and outside of the church. And I think it's just something that was a part of me. And so I just decided that was my calling and that's what God wanted me to do.
Let me ask this. Why is it that you'd think people go into teaching? Because it's not exactly for the money. Teachers work incredibly long hours, a lot of unpaid, unrecognized hours, volunteering after school, setting up events, the grading and lesson plan that goes home. What is it that drives people to teach?
I really think it just, one, has to be a calling, because without it being a calling, there's really no purpose in it. Two, I think you want to be able to make a difference. Mm-hmm. If you don't have that drive to make a difference, then there's no purpose in you teaching. I feel like every teacher has to be called to be a teacher, and they need to have that drive to want to change the next generation, to want to help them, to want to help people learn and grow.
Yeah. And you've had an interesting experience because the two schools that you've taught at full time, one was a private Christian school that was associated with the church, and now you're teaching at what's recognized as a Title I school here in Evansville, which is a public school that also faces a lot of, financial struggles with some of the families that go there. And, you receive extra funding and kind of recognition and stuff like that. What would you say is the biggest difference between when you had to teach at a private school versus going to a public school?
The biggest difference for me that I've seen is just academically where the kids are at. I see in private school that they are on track more, and they have more resources than most of my students I have now. And so they have parents that can afford them to go to tutoring or get extra help and that kind of things if they're falling behind in school. I also see that more parents are involved in their student's life, and so they want to know what's happening in the class, and they want to be up and up on what's going on. Not that I'm saying that parents aren't like that at the school that I currently work at, but I see a bigger impact on how the parents are with the students at my private school that I taught at versus where I teach now.
Yeah. And that kind of comes with blessing and curses sometimes, mm-hmm. right? Sometimes you get the over-involved parent. Yeah. Sometimes you get the parent who thinks that their child can do no wrong, mm-hmm. which you can get that at just about any school. So one of the things that obviously we talk about a lot on this podcast is ministry. Obviously, there's a huge difference from going to a private school. Mm-hmm. I know the private school you worked at, kids had to pretty much be a part of a church, have a connection. Mm-hmm. It's the same way for private schools here, or at least most of them. But what are some of the struggles that teachers kind of deal with when it comes to their faith? Because obviously, in the United States, you're not allowed to share your faith. Mm-hmm. You're not allowed to go out of your way to pray with kids. So can you kind of tell some of us who may not be informed, what are some of the basic restrictions that teachers who are Christians have to know when they're going into their job in public schools?
Well, we just cannot really be upfront about our religion. I do, if a student asks me a question, I'll tell them how I feel or what I believe, but we're really just not supposed to say our opinion on any kind of religion. So we have to stay very neutral in a lot of situations.
Okay. And I have heard before about teachers who do talk about Jesus with their kids. So kind of let us know, is there like a situation where it could happen and that's not a problem? Or is it just an absolute can't tell anyone about your personal stance?
I think there's a lot of situations in the classroom where you can actually tell them about Jesus. For example, on my calendar that I have in my classroom last year, I had Good Friday as one of our like events on the calendar, like a holiday, you know. Yeah. And so there's a lot of my students ask me, well, what was Good Friday? Well, that opens up a whole can of worms because they're the ones that approached me and asked me about what's Good Friday. And so they're the ones that are curious about it. And so there's a lot of avenues in that way where you can kind of tell them about it, but not be as direct and like, this is what I believe kind of thing. I leave it kind of open to be like, this is what Christians believe.
Okay. So that's kind of the opening, is that you can't yourself bring it up in conversation, but you as a teacher, it's your responsibility when your kids ask you a question, as long as it's appropriate, you have to give the answer.
Yeah. And I mean, I think even in the classroom, you can show them Jesus without saying his name. Yeah. Just by the way you are interacting with them every day. Mm-hmm. I don't think you have to say the name of Jesus to show them his characteristics.
Yeah, not all the time. Especially when a kid may come from a really broken home environment where maybe they don't see a lot of some of the traits of Jesus, a lot. And so when they come to your classroom and they begin to see some of the traits of Jesus, the fruit of the Spirit in you, that's definitely eye-opening for them. And they're kind of wondering, man, what is different about this person, Exactly. And I think it's crazy that even at a young age, kids can see that difference. Like, adults can see the difference, but it's crazy that even, like, younger kids sometimes have a better way of even seeing it than others. Mm-hmm. Yeah. One of the things that I always get interested about, I think that the church is the pillar of any community that's in. If a community is healthy, then it tends to have healthy churches. But one kind of arena that the church has been struggling with for decades now is that there are some schools that have decided that they want to shut out the local church, that they don't want involvement, they don't want help, they don't want the church to advertise there, they don't want pastors visiting their school. But you've had kind of a different experience at T-Couple, because I remember last year there was a church that was a huge blessing to you and your fellow teachers. Can you tell us a little bit about what happened there?
Yeah, so we had a church here on the west side come in and do breakfast every time we had a staff meeting on once a month Wednesday mornings. That was awesome for us. And then they also did a lot of wish list clearing for teachers.
What's a wish list clearing?
And so that's teachers do a lot of Amazon wish lists, what they would like for their classrooms that we don't get funding for. Yeah. And so they would clear our wish lists that we would want on Amazon. And so that was a huge blessing too. They would just give us little like reminders, like little stuff in our mailbox from time to time, be like, hey, you're appreciated, you are loved, like that kind of stuff. And little things like that goes a long way whenever you're having a really hard day. So
yeah. Before we go back to the church thing, talk to me about that, because I think that's something a lot of people don't take into account with teachers. For the most part, unless like you have, some generous people who help you out, you're on the hook. You're expected to pay for all the decorations in your classroom. Mm-hmm. If you want to use, maybe a special paper for an assignment or decoration, toys in your classroom, games in your classroom, that's not funded often by the taxpayer. It's usually funded by you or maybe the generosity of your parents. So what would you say to people who maybe don't realize stuff like that?
Well, I do think teachers in general are having a more presence with that. And you can see it on social media and stuff. Mm-hmm. The wish list. Yeah, the wish list. And I've seen a lot of even like before and after photos people take of like their classrooms. So for example, like my new classroom I just moved into, didn't have anything on the walls, blank bulletin boards, like, and then you see what it is now, where it's full of color and full of Snoopy. Like, those are the things that kids want to be in. They want to be a part of a class that's full of things, that are full of, like, opportunities, that are full of life.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, just a government-funded classroom, it's just blank walls and blank space.
Yeah. And I've been in those classrooms when we moved you in. They kind of, they almost look like prisons sometimes with how gray they are. Like,
yeah.
There's not any life to them if it's not for those decorations.
Right, exactly. I look back on, like, what my room was before we switched it this year.
Oh, wow.
And, what it is now, it's completely different.
Oh, it's incredible. Yeah. And it's kind of a fun thing. Like, each teacher gets to put their own personality behind it. So almost like your room's part of you. It's part of the culture that you're setting in your classroom.
It is. It really is.
Yeah. Well, let's go back to talking about church involvement. Because you said you had a church give a lot to your classroom. And obviously I'm saying this knowing, about what happened. But, for the people who are watching, listening, tell us about kind of the extent of what they did to you, what kind of blessing they were to you.
For me, it was a huge blessing just to be able to receive anything for my classroom. That's just, like, less dollars.
Doesn't happen a lot out of Title I school.
Yeah, so it's just less dollars that I'm spending on my own classroom that I can actually use for real life things. Yeah. And so any time you can get anything donated to the classroom is huge. And it was always nice too. I always thought they went out of their way to make teachers feel appreciated just by doing simple acts like having breakfast for us during our staff meetings and because everyone's running late on staff meeting day.
Yeah, it kind of give you a little bit of motivation to get there.
And so they would come around to the classrooms too, even afterwards, and if they had leftover coffee or whatever, they would personally deliver it to us. So
yeah, and what's so crazy is that that's not the norm for all the schools in our area. There's a lot of schools that they don't see much support. They don't really have relationships with the local churches. And some of that isn't even that they've been pushed out. Because I do know some schools, even like rural schools, that will tell the church, we don't want you around here. We're going to keep things separated. But what kind of opportunities do you see in schools where a church can be involved? Because it's not necessarily like anything big sometimes. Like what you're talking about is putting on a breakfast once a month. Like what are some other opportunities and needs that a school like yours has that a local church could just step in and start being a blessing to them?
Well, I think just doing small things like that. I do think too, like even just getting involved and wanting to like volunteer at like school events. So we do like Halloween parties and we do what's called a fun fest. Well, it's all teachers who are volunteering and working the whole thing, but sometimes there's not enough of us to spread around. And so just having like an extra set of hands to like help do things on big event days is super helpful too. And like we even have some ladies that come in and help during recess time.
Yeah.
And so someone else can, like an aide, instead of doing duty, can go to a classroom and like help a teacher. And so that gives like an extra hand too.
Yeah. And one thing that people don't consider is the amount of volunteer hours that goes into teaching. And that could be anything from setting up a classroom, but also, you're the volleyball coach, one of the volleyball coaches for T-Couple. And as of right now, for a lot of EVSC at that level, that's a volunteer position. But it's not just the coaching. It's having people just at games to run concession stand. Now you're going to have people doing tickets at the door. So there's tons of opportunity that it's not even a money thing. It's just having people be there.
Right, because if we don't have people to do concessions and do scoreboard and stuff, we can't have a team. And so it's so important to our volleyball team that we have people for those things so that, one, we can sell concessions, and that's how we make money for our own team. And that's how we give these girls, like at the end of the season, we give them a big pizza party and that kind of stuff. That's how we get money for that. That's how we get money for their jerseys. That's how we get money for other things. If we need a new net, whatever the case might be, new volleyballs, money has to come from somewhere.
Yeah.
And so without volunteers, we really can't do a concession stand to make that money.
So let me just ask a question and just make it as clear as day. You're telling me that churches, wherever they are, have an opening into one of the hardest mission fields in the United States to break into, the school, and they don't need to spend a bunch of money. They don't need to have a big church. They just need to have a few people willing to give their time.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Yeah, I think that's a challenge to any church out there who's just looking for some kind of evangelism opportunity. You can just go be a presence in your school, and there's a lot, and depending on what the school is, they're probably just begging for someone to slip in. I know there's plenty of parents that are begging just for someone to do the scoreboard so they don't have to at volleyball and basketball games. I was one of those one time. Oh, but absolutely. That's such an amazing thing to hear. Just something that people don't think about. Because the school is, I would say, the number one mission field that the church sometimes is quick to access, right? And often, like, we're surrounded by schools. We have tons here in Evansville. What are some of the things that you've seen as a teacher about just how there's a need for the presence of God in your school? Like, maybe, have you had experiences with families hurting or kids not getting enough school supplies that you're just like, man, I just wish they had a church they could be a part of, because I just know it would benefit their life so much?
Well, trauma can follow anyone, and it can be a part of anyone's life. And so you don't see a lot of times like how that adult trauma and their parents can affect how they are and affect their lives as much. And so I think as a church, we need to be helping not only the kids, but the parents also. There's so many of them that are looking just to have someone there with them, someone for them, someone that's not against them.
Awesome. One of the things I want to switch gears on, because I wanted to touch on, me and you graduated when COVID was still going on. When I say graduate, I mean college. Both going to Oakland City University and go Mighty Oaks. But when we graduated from college, it was interesting because you were teaching kids, doing student teaching, when pandemic was hitting, and you started teaching kind of in the recovery phases of that. And that's it is such like, I would say maybe a nuclear topic to talk about still to this day. What are some of the things that you have seen in kids in the past, since you've spent your entire teaching career teaching post-pandemic? What are some things that you've seen, how it's impacted kids who experienced that during their early years?
The biggest impact I've seen is social interaction. The kids don't really know how to socialize with each other anymore, how to talk to each other, or even play with each other. Because they're in preschool, these kids were socially distanced, and they had to play with their own bin of toys because we couldn't share because of germs.
Oh, wow.
And so they don't know how to play together very well.
Wow.
Even in like second or third grade, because they're still learning and developing those skills that they didn't get in, like, let's say preschool or kindergarten, because they had to social distance. Another big factor we see is speech. A lot of them still struggle with speech, different sounds, because they were used to either one, talking with a mask on, and so they have to like undo bad habits that they developed during that maybe we didn't catch because we couldn't hear them as well with the mask on. And two, we maybe didn't catch some things as early as we could have because of the barrier of the mask too. And so we see a lot more students with speech issues now than what we used to because of those things.
Got it. Wow. Yeah, I don't think many people think about that kind of stuff at all, especially like the importance of learning the rules of play, because it's more than just playing with toys. It's how you learn how to communicate with people. Yeah, absolutely.
I also say with the speech thing too, when wearing a mask, a lot of times with me doing first grade now, I tell them to watch like my mouth when I speak. and have them watch me make the sounds with my mouth. And that was hard to do when we were wearing a mask.
Interesting. I know that you've, done basically your whole teaching career, in, I'm going to call it the modern age, but I only say that because obviously we know a lot of teachers who've been teaching just for decades, so one of the things that I think it's interesting, what's it like teaching with a generation that has grown up with a screen in their hand, almost since they were born? What are some of the struggles and challenges that modern teachers are facing with that?
I think a big challenge is that is what they want 24/7 now. And so they're not used to just watching someone teach or listening to someone teach. If it's not on a screen, it's hard for them to stay focused. And I think it's hard also. It goes back to not as many kids are playing with each other still. They're playing on iPads and tablets, which I'm not saying you shouldn't do that. I'm just saying that, like, there's been some that's all they know to do, and so they don't know how to play games. Like, some of my third graders didn't know how to work a puzzle. Wow. Because they're so used to just having screen time that they don't learn, like, those basic skills that you need. And you don't think about learning to share or doing puzzles as a basic skill, but I do think there's a lot of benefits from those kind of things. Like, when you do a puzzle, you're learning how to match up, like, patterns and pictures and stuff. Yeah. And so whenever you're playing board games, you're learning how to share and take turns. If you're not growing up doing that, you do come into school, I feel like, with a deficit because all you know is how to tap on a screen.
So for some of the parents who might be watching this, grandparents who are watching this, what would you recommend as a teacher, like, for, parents to adopt? Are you saying that they need to have absolutely no screen time? Are you saying that it just needs to be limited? Maybe there just need to be, like, at a certain age they can start playing with it? Like, what are some things that you would recommend?
I don't think there's a set procedure for it. I do think it does depend on parenting styles and that kind of thing. But as a teacher, I do see the benefit of students already coming in knowing how to use some technology. Because we do have it in the classroom, and we do use it for different things in the classroom. So that is one less thing the teachers will, quote unquote, have to teach them in the room, how to use their tablets. But I also think that it's important for parents to remember those skills, like I was talking about earlier, that you learn whenever you're not on screen time that they might be missing out on, like sharing and taking turns and learning how to lose.
Wow. So there's kids that struggle with losing.
There's so many kids that struggle with losing. They can't handle it.
Wow. You see, I wouldn't even think about that, but that's a huge thing.
Well, when you're playing board games, you're not just sharing and taking turns. You're not going to win every time.
Man, that's a huge lesson. Especially that's kind of a hot topic nowadays when we talk about participation trophies and everything like that. The importance of knowing that you can lose and you will lose, and how to react
it's okay.
To that. It's okay to lose, as long as you're not playing board games, and it's not okay to lose. Well, that is just so great. I mean, I've learned a lot, sitting here and talking with you. I guess one of the final things I'd like to talk about, going back to the ministry side of things, we talked about how churches can, go support their teachers, their local schools. What are some ways that our churches need to be praying for our teachers in our schools?
The biggest way we can pray for our teachers is just to give them strength every day. You never know what you're coming into in a school day. You never know what happened overnight. So you never know how your students are going to be walking through that door. And so I think having that daily strength is the biggest thing you can pray for, because you might come into a hurricane.